welcome to a debate on Mark Reid atheism between Joe from the Kentucky Atheist and Kyle Adams. The proposition on the docket tonight is, was there a global flood? With Kyle Adams being in the affirmative and Joe being in the negative. The debate format is going to be about 12-minute openings, no greater than 12-minute openings. We're going to have a 5-minute rebuttal and then a open discussion followed by a Q&A. I didn't actually ask you guys who wanted to go first. Usually it is the affirmative traditionally, but if you know you've got a problem with that, Kyle, we can certainly sort something out.
I'm going to say the same thing either way, so it doesn't matter.
I don't care either way either.
Okay, well, we'll keep it traditional, and maybe the affirmative can go first, just because that's I do like traditional debates. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it respectful, and if the floor is all yours, Kyle, I'll just remove us, and feel free to take it away.
Okay, so you said that, was there a global flood? Well, I am going to agree that there was no global flood because I'm not a globe earther. I'm a flat earther. Nonetheless, we're going to just build this off of, was there a flood, like a worldwide flood? And I can go off of that one. Okay. But to get this going, I don't believe there was just one great worldwide flood. There's actually two great wide floods. Okay. There was one in the very beginning of Genesis. Okay. When the entire world was covered in water. That's kind of the way it was in the very beginning. And if we read in Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good." So at no point here does it say God poofed the world into existence. And so that's kind of a big thing that kind of makes me unique, is I'm not one of those kind of people who, I'm not exactly a young earth creationist. I am a creationist, but to say that God poofed everything to existence right there in the beginning of Genesis, that doesn't describe what I see there. And for me, the whole concept of God poofing everything into existence in the beginning of Genesis, it seems to relay to me a God that existed for an infinite amount of time past, doing absolutely nothing, while at the same time being surrounded by absolutely nothing. And so a God that does nothing for an infinite amount of time past, and it's surrounded by nothing for an infinite amount of time past, that sounds like a God that just did not exist, or a dead God for an infinite amount of time past. And that's not like what I believe in at all. I believe God has always been busy doing things. And so on this premise of being two great worldwide floods, okay, we've got the one in the very beginning of Genesis, and we also have the one in the time of the flood of Noah. And because there's two great ones, I don't want to conflate the different evidences between the two, because there's a lot of evidence for both of them. But it needs to be remembered that the flood in time of Noah was really short. I believe it was only 40 days long or something like that. But who knows how long the very first flood was. Okay. And so one of the big differences here between the flood of Noah versus the flood in the very beginning is the presence of life. The flood of Noah wiped out all kinds of creatures and stuff, but with the one before it, I don't believe there was any kind of life on the earth that came out of the depths. I don't think there was any kind of life within that. But with the flood of Noah, there would have been a lot of dead bodies and stuff. When it comes to evidence for these floods, I think it's pretty abundant. When it comes to sedimentary rock, okay, limestone itself can't be created without some kind of flood scenario. And I think the other major evidence there is fossils. Okay. I've got it from the Australian Museum. Okay. The Australian Museum, their direct quote says, fossils of terrestrial land animals are scarcer than those of plants. In order to become fossilized, animals must die in a watery environment to become buried in the mud and silt. So fossilization itself is evidence of a flood. And I can also point out like all these different like fossils that appear on top of mountains and way inland. I'm living all the way out in Utah, and we still find all kinds of fossils out in the mountains. I did a big geology field trip, and my teachers were out there telling me about all of the different sea creatures that they'd find like fossilized out in the mountaintops, and I always thought that was really interesting. And part of where I live in the St. George area, we've got a lot of these great big plateaus and really stripy rocks. And those, like, it's kind of like a Grand Canyon kind of setting. And you just see it all over the place. But when a catastrophic flood happens, dirt gets mixed up, and that dirt does not all settle in the same layer. And so part of geology and geography, when I was in college, they taught me about doing soil tests and how I can put a whole bunch of different soil into a jar, pour a bunch of water in it, shake it up, and then I can just watch the soil settle. And as that soil settles, it settles in these stripes. And that's how we're able to determine kind of the content of the soil doing this test. And that's how we can say, okay, well, there's this much clay in there, there's this much sand, and we can determine what we need to add to our soil to improve upon it. And so there's an abundant amount of just evidence when it comes to the stripes that we see in dirt and in the mountains. And I think those are kind of like my major points. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it. I'm going to close with that.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle. I appreciate it, mate. And next up for an up to 12-minute opening, we have the Kentucky Atheist. Joe, floor is all yours. Take it away.
All right. The first thing I want to say is thank you, Kyle, for accepting this debate. And thanks so much, Mark, for hosting this. And let me start by saying, I know this is kind of a stale subject and stuff, but as long as religion continues to spread lies about science and the world around us, someone will refute those lies. And today, everyone just got the bad luck of it being me. So the question is, did a global flood occur or a worldwide flood? I'm fine with that. Specifically, in true crazy ex-girlfriend fashion, did God get mad at his perfect creation because they were bumping uglies with angels and kill every living thing on the earth, saving only 8 people? So that they could repopulate the earth through incest? No, this is a fairy tale, and it's simply make-believe. It's post hoc rationalization engaged in by those who discount everything science tells us in favor of a book says a thing. You would have to dismiss not just geology, the study of the literal rocks we can see with our literal eyes, but also much of the life sciences, earth sciences, and space sciences. If the earth is billions of years old, is the earth billions of years old? No, my book says a thing. Did dinosaurs die millions of years ago before man? No, my book says a thing. Did evolution explain the vast diversity of life on Earth? No, my book says a thing. Creationists take the things their chosen holy book says and then try to bend science and the natural world to fit that narrative. And in this case, not only is it just fallacious thinking, but it's also completely ridiculous on the face of it. The story goes something like this. God was mad because man was so wicked, so he sent the waters from the deep and opened the windows of heaven, whatever that means, to allow the earth to be inundated with enough water to cover the tallest mountains, Everest being close to 30,000 feet, the cruising altitude of most airlines today. But he saved Noah, who was 600 years old, mind you, and put 2 of every kind of animal on it, or 7, depending on your flavor of religion, and the flood was sent to kill everything with the breath of life that wasn't on the ark. There are flood myths going back way before before Genesis narrative. And according to scholars, Genesis was written sometime between 800 and 500 BCE. These stories seem to originate from ancient Mesopotamian stories some 7,600 years ago, which may I point out is before most young Earth creationists believe the universe even existed. And it describes the flooding of the Black Sea, which to the people of the time would have seemed like the whole world, but wasn't. The most notable text that comes to mind is the Epic of Gilgamesh, but it's not the only one that tells the same story from a different perspective. How do you account for not just the sciences, but mythology even disproving the narrative of Noah's flood? We have records from China and Egypt who seem to not even notice that they all drowned in a global flood, and in fact managed to keep right on going even while being dead. Even the Yazidis in Iraq had a calendar that kept going for thousands of years before and after the proposed flood in the Bible. How did these cultures continue calendars and records if they were all wiped out by a flood? And afterwards, I'll drop a link in the chat for all of this stuff so you can see where it comes from. There's not a shred of evidence to suggest that the earth was ever covered by miles and miles of water, but it's actually worse than that. Because even if we took every drop of water from the atmosphere, added that to every drop of water contained in the world's glaciers, and added that to every drop of water in the top couple of miles of the Earth's crust, you still would only have a small percentage of the water that you would need. Furthermore, there are cities, never mind mountains, that still wouldn't flood, as they are thousands of feet, if not miles above sea level. There just isn't enough water. Exponentially more water would be needed than all of the oceans combined. And let's see, so let's see what some of the experts have to say. The one thing we know for sure from geology is that a global flood never happened, said David Montgomery, a professor of geomorphology at the University of Washington in Seattle. He wrote a book called The Rocks Don't Lie, a Geologist Investigates Noah's Flood. If you look at it as literally a global flood that covered the world's highest mountains, I'm sorry, there's just not enough water to do that on Earth, he told Life Science. Geologist James St. John, in an article by Conversation magazine titled, "Even Setting Evolution Aside, Basic Geology Disproves Creationism." He said, "I don't have to travel very far to make this case. There's a slab of polished rock on the wall outside of my department office that refutes so-called flood geology. The view that a global world-shattering flood explains geologic history after the initial creation of the earth by God. It's an 8-foot-long slab of conglomerate, a rock made from waterworked fragments of older rock. It's what you get if you buried a riverbed composed of many different types of rock deep enough below ground for the temperature and pressure to forge it into new rock, and it's preserved in it. You can see the original particles of sand, gravel, and cobbles made of various kinds of rock. And if you look closely, you can see some cobbles are themselves conglomerates, or rocks within rocks. Those are but two experts from two fields that explain in very simple terms why it's not possible to conclude that a global flood took place from looking at the world around us. The question Kyle needs to answer is how, in the face of both literal and figurative mountains of evidence that proves that a global flood never occurred, do you continue to believe in such an extremely unsupported claim? Never mind, I know, your book says a thing. So how about this? Can you show me a shred of scientific evidence that uniquely, and that's the key word, uniquely points to your narrative? Can you do that without contradicting whole other fields of science? And I don't think you can even come close to meeting the standard. Many creationists point to the geologic column and say the layers of strata we see were laid down by the flood, and it was this catastrophic event that accounts for the fossils we see. Neither the fossils or the flood point to this conclusion, though. It's not just the shape and lack of uniformity that show this, though. None of it's organized by density, rather by age. And this is exactly what you would expect to see if a flood were the case. It would be organized by density. By what methodology outside of the Bible can one come to the conclusion that a global flood took place? And where does several times of the water needed to do this flood go afterwards? These questions speak directly to the problem with this kind of position, because not only do we not see evidence of a worldwide flood in any branch of science, but we actually see very strong evidence that this never happened. And I think the numbers prove it's impossible to have ever happened. Unless my opponent wants to claim a miracle, he should be able to answer these questions very simply. And if he does want to claim a miracle, that really explains nothing. And the conversation kind of ends there, because we live in a physical world. And when major events like a global flood occur, they leave evidence behind. And it's just not there in this case. thank you. I concede the rest of my time.
Thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate it. And I'll add Carl back in. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are enjoying the content. Right now, we're going to go to 5-minute rebuttals. So, Kyle, the floor is all yours. Take it away for your 5-minute rebuttal.
Okay. I'm not one of those people who believe that like angels went and mated with men and created these weird like demi angels or whatever. Yeah, that's not my narrative. But do you agree with the Australian Museum that states that fossils cannot be formed without a flood?
Sorry, Carl, are you sort of doing a Q&A on impromptu here kind of thing? Is that what you're...
Oh, I thought this was open discussion. Was it not?
No, this is a rebuttal.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I guess if this is a rebuttal, calendars do not depend on floods. Okay. They don't depend on them. Calendars are about the sky. And so I've got some great calendars, star charts that talk about like watching the moon and the way the moon moves. Okay. And if something happens down here on Earth, that's not going to disrupt the calendar at all. If all of the entire world burned today, there's still going to be a tomorrow and a day after tomorrow and the day after that. And so, time itself is independent of what happens here on the ground. Okay. So I also mentioned nothing he said there rebutted the Australian Museum and limestone and sedimentary rock. I think that's kind of the major things that really stood out to me is, so I'm just anxious to hear about that. I'll hear what he has to say.
No problem at all. Fantastic. Thank you, Carl. And Joe, your 5-minute rebuttal, up to 5 minutes. You can take it away anytime you like.
Okay. So, he started with talking about a worldwide flood versus global, and that's not really, it doesn't really matter. And, speaking of Genesis, even if you accept that Genesis is absolutely true, if the world started covered by water, that's not a flood. There's no land to flood. It's just a water world. So I mean, I think it was obvious though that we were talking about Noah's flood specifically, but maybe I should have come up with a more specific proposition. So I'll take the fault on that. But you spent a lot of time addressing flat Earth and the claims, of a young Earth, and we can definitely talk about those in our Q&A if you want. But 40 days, you said the flood was shortened only for 40 days. That just doesn't agree with the Bible. The Bible talks about it being 10 months. So I don't understand. But you got into evidence, and you said limestone can't form. Or the limestone we see formed in the turbulent waters of a worldwide flood. And that's not how limestone needs very specific conditions to form. It doesn't, the turbulent waters of a flood wouldn't allow the limestone to precipitate and form. It would just become scattered until it had a place where it could settle. In a worldwide flood, it wouldn't be able to settle out like that. I mean, I guess you could say there was standing water in places afterwards, but I mean, that's just local flooding anyway. The mountains, you talked about the mountains and that we find seashells and stuff on mountaintops. Yeah, that's plate tectonics 101. When two plates come together, they push and it causes an uprising. And there's other ways to do this too, but that takes many, many years. So these could be low-lying places, and then due to plate tectonics, an uprising occurs, and then you would find those fossils there. It's perfectly explained by geology. I don't know about what, seeing stripy mountains means. I mean, seeing stripes doesn't explain anything. And the biggest problem with making that argument is that it doesn't speak specifically to a worldwide flood. Even if we agreed to that, you would still have to explain how the fossils aren't layered this way. It's nothing's layered by density, and we can see that you have less dense fossils in all different layers and dense fossils in different layers, and fossils that aren't supposed to be in other layers aren't there, there wouldn't be the uniformity that we see as far as things staying out of other layers. And the reason for that is because sometimes there's millions of years between some of this, and again, explained completely by geology. And just to hit on a little bit of what you said in your rebuttal, calendars don't depend on a flood. Well, that's true, but the people that make the calendars, the culture that makes calendars in their language and starts with a certain year, carried on. And if not, you would expect to see them adopt the same calendars everywhere. And that's just not the case. And one of the links that I'll drop in the chat here is I talked about the Yazidis in Iraq who were actually in the local area, and we're talking about things before, after, and during the flood, and no mention of it. But I think, I mean, I think we'll get into more of it in the Q&A. So I'll just leave it there for now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, John. We'll start up with the open discussion, maybe 30 to 40 minutes open discussion. I think that we ended with Joe. So Kyle, if you want to kick us off with your opening discussion points, we can get moving.
Okay. Do you agree with the Australian Museum that says fossils cannot form without a flood?
I think that, I mean, honestly, I don't know of an example of fossils forming without some kind of moisture present. I wouldn't say that they can't, but I don't know about it. But water doesn't equal flood.
Okay. It's still water, but
yeah,
exactly.
It's still water.
It's still water. Yeah, I don't know. But there needs to be enough water in order for that fossil to form. Right, that's
so
going to be some kind of a flood.
Water do you think you need to, like? I mean, the addition of water isn't because the water itself is necessary. It's because the water allows the silt and sediments and mud and stuff to cover those life forms easily. It's not standing water that's the thing. It's mudslides and things like that. It's catastrophic things.
That's
usually.
To get buried, right?
But there's also tar pits. So I guess I would say the water is not necessary. The tar pits, you know, there's tons of fossils there with no water.
Okay, so you're directly disagreeing with the Australian Museum then?
Are you disagreeing that there's fossils in the La Brea tar pits?
I'm not really familiar with the La Brea tar pits, really, so I couldn't say.
I think maybe, and I haven't seen this quote, and
I got a screenshot. I can share.
I'm not accusing you of quote mining them or anything like that, but I haven't seen this quote, and it seems to me like moisture doesn't necessarily mean water, and I would find it odd to use the word water, honestly, because it seems too simple. Because mud, silt, sediments, usually when making a scientific statement, they wouldn't say something as general as just water. But if that's what they say, that water is necessary, I do disagree. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and I'm willing to concede there with liquid like a tar kind of a substance.
Okay, yeah, I would accept that.
If it was oil, if it was oil, yeah, sure, I can go with liquid.
Okay.
But yeah,
sure.
Okay,
you want to ask more, or you want me to ask you some stuff?
So when it comes to like sedimentary rock, do you agree that sedimentary rock requires like continual water presence or a flood-like environment in order to form?
I think that water is required for sediments. I think that's the definition of sediments. Actually, I think it's in the definition. Again, I don't have this in front of me, but I believe that water is required for sediment because it precipitates. That's.
You should agree with me then that there is evidence for some kind of a flood. The big question here is whether or not it was the flood.
You're giving me evidence of water, not evidence of a flood. And water exists, and floods do happen. Local floods happen, even super local floods happen. But here's the thing with that, though. Whenever we see these places that are flooded and we find fossils and stuff, we also see evidence of the floods that occurred there. And if a worldwide flood occurred, we would see evidence of it all over the world, but we just don't. It's just not it doesn't follow to say, oh, well, fossils need water, so the earth was covered in water. That's not, you're post hoc rationalizing your book with water, with fossils and stuff. There's no evidence that points uniquely to that.
All right. So you're restating what I just said about that there is evidence for a water presence. Okay. There are evidence for floods, but the question is whether or not it is the flood that covered the entire world.
I don't think there was ever a flood that covered the entire world. And of course I couldn't say 100% that didn't occur, but I don't think there's any evidence for you to make the statement that it did. That's really the issue I take with this.
Okay. So again, that's just kind of restating what I kind of just said.
If that's what you said, you just conceded the whole debate.
Okay. No, I just said that the question is whether or not there is evidence of water, okay, throughout the world, right? And so that a rain can be considered a flood.
It can flood when it rains, yes.
Yeah, a rain, just an amount of rain can be considered like a flood. Okay, so the question is whether or not the evidence is of the flood rather than just a flood.
I don't even think that you're stating evidence of a flood. You're just stating evidence that sometimes things died in wet places. Like I think that's really all you're pointing. That is
what a flood is.
Well, that's not all. That a flood would be a unique situation with water. Just because water is present doesn't mean that it's a flood. There were floods. There were inland seas. There were rivers, lake beds, and everything that have changed over time through geomorphic changes of the earth and geology, for that matter, if we get into plate tectonics. But we do have standing water in places. We do have rains. We do have floods. We do have mudslides. All of those things happen. The thing that you need to explain, though, is how you get from a flood to a worldwide flood.
Yeah, that's what I said. So, yeah, that's what I said. We should. It's
so. How do we make that?
But you're got to acknowledge here that there is presence of water. There's evidence of floods.
There is evidence of water since the beginning of the earth. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we can move on from that. And so you mentioned here about Mount Everest and how Mount Everest pushed all the sea creatures and those fossils up to the top of the mountains, right? And so you're conceding the point that Everest was once covered in water.
Yes.
Okay.
Only it wasn't Everest then.
Huh?
It wasn't Everest when it was covered in water.
It was that landmass. You're conceding the point that landmass was once covered in water.
Yes. There was a landmass that was lower than sea level that was covered in water. Yes.
Okay.
That's why we find fossils there of seashells and things, because they formed fossils when it was low lying, and then as the uprising occurred, it took the fossils with it, and now you find them on top of a mountain.
Okay. And
we know how mountains form.
Yeah. And so the question here in our debate, our kind of our focus point now, is it's not whether or not Everest was ever underwater. It's about when Everest was underwater.
Yeah.
Can you agree with that?
Yeah. And I think the fossils that are found up at the top of Everest, or at least in the higher parts of Everest, I think you can talk about when it was low lying just based on that. We have things called index fossils, which, help indicate the time period. Not to even get into radiometric dating, because I know you're going to throw a shit fit on that.
So what evidence do you have that that the flood of Everest was not Noah's flood?
That's a really strange way to pose a question, but I would say that just to kind of answer it, though, I would say that the fossils that we find on Everest are evidence that it was once a sea floor. I mean, that's what the evidence points to. That's you're trying to say, how can you prove what the evidence doesn't point to? And that's just nonsense. You would have to
how can I prove what the evidence doesn't point to?
Yeah, that's
yet
what you asked me to do. You said, how can I prove that those are not from Noah's flood? And that's a weird way to ask a question. That's the post hoc rationalization that I'm talking about. When you take your idea and you've read a book and it says a thing, and then you're trying to rationalize these other things based on that. But if you just take the evidence as it is and look at it, it doesn't point to a worldwide flood. It points to Everest once being on the seafloor, because once again, we know how mountains are formed.
Okay. So when do you claim Everest was on the seafloor?
I don't know the number of years ago, honestly, but again, the fossils that are there indicate that. I don't,
Okay, so we can
it's
both
something
agree
that can
that
easily be Googled, I guess.
all right, we can both agree that Everest was once on the seafloor, covered by water.
Yes. Your only thing is you think it was already a mountain, and I don't.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm not a person who says poof, God
Sure.
suddenly created the mountain there or anything like that.
So then you accept the geologic processes of plate tectonics that are responsible for the uprising of mountains.
Some of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Plate tectonics is a really big thing, and I don't feel like it's fully explored yet, and I don't think people understand it quite as well as they think they do. And so, but like I said, there's 2 floods that took place, and I don't want to when it comes to Noah's flood versus the first flood.
Well, let's just skip the first flood for the sake of brevity, because I think we have plenty to talk about with Noah's flood.
Okay. Well, I think.
Unless there's some point you're trying to make about Noah's flood with it.
I think the whole thing about the first flood is something that we can agree with. That's kind of common ground. Establishing that common ground. Definitely because you're already acknowledging that Everest was once underwater, on the seafloor, and I'm acknowledging that it was once underwater on the seafloor. So I think that's pretty significant common ground.
Here's the problem though. It's the mechanisms that you think it was underwater because of. I think it was underwater because that's how plate tectonics works. Low-lying places in subduction points are pushed up by an uprising whenever 2 plates collide. You seem to believe that it was underwater because it was already a mountain, and this proves that a worldwide flood occurred. And again, let me grant that for a moment, okay? And let me grant that a worldwide flood occurred. Where did all the water come from?
Okay, well, I believe in a firmament, and there's also springs underwater, there's underwater geysers. We also have geysers above water, like Old Faithful. Okay, and these geysers are able to produce water, right? There's a lot of water that's under the ground. Have you heard of the what's the word? Sorry, lost for words there. There is a level of water that is underneath all of the ground. Do you agree with that? There are underwater lakes. Do you agree that there are underwater lakes?
Yes, I do actually agree that there's all kinds of water underground. Of it. There's giant reservoirs of water under the ground. I agree. Groundwater exists.
Okay. So groundwater exists. Okay, that's some really good common ground to have.
So let me ask a question real quick though. And let me first point out though, I addressed this in my opening and again, I need to bring back up my document and post the links for everybody. But there is not enough water in all these things combined to account for even a small percentage of what would be required in the top of flood that would put mountains underwater all over the earth. There's just not that much water there.
You're making a claim that I think is bigger than your mouth is, because in order for you to assert that, you would have to know exactly how much water is in these underground lakes, and you have to be able to account for all of the water, underground. So, I don't think you can do that.
No, and I don't. But I'll put the link in the chat for the scientists that do for you. So it's not my mouth making this statement. So
you're claiming that there's a scientist out there who's able
There's not
to
a scientist.
Okay, so you claim there are multiple scientists out there who are able to account for all of the water, both above and below ground?
So this gets kind of complicated here, okay? So stay with me. And this is over my head a little bit too. That's it's not being mean to you. I'm just saying. So in the top like mile and a half of the Earth's crust is where we find water as you know it as water. Now, when we go a little bit deeper than that, we find that it's and I forget the hydroxide. It's a hydroxide, and it's not the same as water. And again, this is, I need to get the link here in a second. I'm so sorry for this. Usually I'm prepared with a source, but I closed my documents after I did my opening. But so the way that I imagine that this was done is that the groundwater that they've been able to study and what they found, I'm sure there are some estimations and things done here to cover the whole Earth, but whenever you're talking about a global flood that would cover the tops of the tallest mountains in the world, you're talking like something like 10 to 12 times the amount of water in all of the oceans combined. This isn't so we know there's not that much water in the ground. Just by looking, because it can only exist in a certain area. There's not water all the way down to the core of the Earth, right?
You're making this big reification fallacy by saying we know that there's not that much water under the ground, but you haven't really provided any evidence that there is not that much water underground. Okay.
We have yet to find any oceans of water in the area that water can exist under the Earth's surface. And until some kind of evidence is found that these oceans 10 times the size of the oceans on Earth exist, there's no reason to say that it does. That's really the point I'm coming from. Is that you can, I'm not just saying these things. I can provide sources for these things. Your source for these things is, well, this book says it, so it has to be this way. And that's not how we do anything to get to the truth of a proposition.
Okay. And I didn't say the book says it, therefore it has to be so.
Your opening was completely you telling us what the Bible says. So that's why I said that.
Okay, so I didn't say that the Bible says so, therefore it's true.
So it may not be true?
And so, like, the whole flat Earth thing is there to prove the Bible. The Bible doesn't prove flat Earth proves the Bible. That's how it works.
That's ridiculous.
Sorry, just saying that's ridiculous.
I don't even know.
That doesn't.
We would have to get into a whole argument. Sorry, go ahead. I'll stop. Go ahead.
I said that's not a valid argument. Just saying that's ridiculous. Yeah.
Sometimes things are ridiculous, though. Like,
that's not a valid argument.
You're making claims that are not backed by any evidence, and in fact, there is mountains, again, both figurative and literally, that refute what you're saying. Now, we can get into a whole thing about the flat Earth some other time, and I can completely prove you wrong about that as well, if you'd like.
Well, you're welcome to try. You're welcome to try. Yeah. I wouldn't be a flat earther if there was no evidence for a flat Earth.
And you caught me on something there, because atheists sometimes are guilty of this. We say there's no evidence for something, and really what I mean is there's no good evidence. There's no sufficient evidence for you to make the claims that you're making. There is evidence, I guess, that you can point to, but how you arrive at that evidence matters. The methodology matters. The mechanisms matter. And you dismiss all of that to make these claims.
Okay, you're just kind of waving your gums now here, because when did I do that?
Well,
let's provide a direct quote of me doing that, and then we can talk about it.
When you say that flat Earth points to evidence of the Bible, that's just you saying something. There's not no evidence points to that. Like, other than things that you have arrived at fallaciously.
Okay. A book makes a claim. Okay. How do you go about improving that claim?
Improving the claim.
Proving the claim. How do you prove the claim?
Proving the claim.
If a book makes a claim, how do you go about improving that claim?
How do you go about improving? Well, so the scientific method is the best tool we have for doing that.
Okay. So stop there. Okay. The scientific method. Okay. And so if I go and say the Bible says this, so I want to prove it. And so in order to prove what the Bible says, I'm going to use the scientific method. Is that valid?
Sure.
Okay.
But I mean, here's the problem: is if it's your hypothesis that okay, this says a worldwide flood, so I'm going to postulate a worldwide flood. That's fine. But what you're doing is you're making it your conclusion and then saying, okay, now I'm going to prove it with this.
Okay. When and where did I do that?
You don't recognize that this is all based on what one book says and not science and not methodology and not anything other than your faith, which is useless in this scenario.
All right. You're just making assumptions here. Okay.
What assumption is
quotes.
there? No, hold on. You accused me of making an assumption. What assumption did I make?
Okay. You assumed that my conclusion was that the Bible says it, therefore it's true. Did you
That's
not just say
literally
that?
what you're arguing today.
No, it is not. It is not. It is not.
Okay.
I never said that. I never said that once. And then, in fact, this whole conversation is happening because I'm correcting you on that.
Okay.
I never said the Bible says it, therefore it's true.
So,
okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for it.
So,
Where's yours?
Hold on. There's a delay or something for a second there. So
yeah, you're lagging out a bit. Are you okay, Joe?
Yeah. Let me 1 second here. Let me close this and this. And is that better?
It seems okay. It seems like a tiny bit of lag, but it seems okay. Maybe we should just keep an eye on it.
Okay. I mean, I'm not getting it on my end now. So.
Okay. Yeah, you seem okay now. Let's continue. So you had a question for Kyle.
So my question would be to you is, if you're not actually, trying to prove your conclusion after you've already made it, then what piece of evidence do you have that uniquely, and again, the word here is uniquely because that's what you need. What piece of evidence do you have that uniquely points to any worldwide flood ever?
What piece of okay, we already agreed that there's a lot of evidence for a lot of like floods.
Uniquely.
Uniquely. And so my thing is the whole presence of sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock was one of my big opening arguments that you never really addressed.
Let me briefly explain something real quick. When we're talking about evidence, and I say that it needs to uniquely point to one conclusion to the exclusion of other conclusions. All right. So what I'm saying is yes, you can say these things are evidence of floods. What is evidence of a worldwide flood of the whole world being covered in miles and miles and miles of water? What is the evidence for that uniquely points to that situation? Because even the sedimentary rocks, we don't find them everywhere. There's other rocks, we don't see that everywhere.
Is there a place where you don't see sand
that you would expect to see? Go ahead. Sorry.
Is there a place that you don't see sand?
I mean, yeah. I see. That's a tricky one because erosion occurs and rock gets broken down into smaller pieces. So again, sand is evidence of erosion. And if you say it's evidence of something to do with a flat earth or a flood or whatever, the problem is then we have to look at it and say, which one of these conclusions is probably true? Which one of these is the best conclusion? And then we find more supporting evidence for it. And eventually we arrive at what's called an emergent truth, where we say, this is most likely the conclusion for this hypothesis. And of course, then we move to theories and things, which are the gold standard for scientific claims. But that's really what I'm getting at is if it's evidence of what we already think happened, then, and you want to point to it and say, no, it's evidence of a flood, you're absolutely trying to use evidence of something else to rationalize your conclusion that it was a flood, which is post hoc rationalization, just like I said from the beginning. Absolutely it is.
I never claimed that my whole conclusion was the Bible says it, therefore it's true. Okay, that's not the conclusion.
Okay. So what evidence do you have that uniquely points to that claim being true outside of the Bible then?
Outside of the Bible. Well, do you agree that sedimentary rock is outside of the Bible?
Yes.
Okay. So we agree that
you still don't understand the word uniquely, and you don't understand how evidence works, is what I'm getting.
Okay, you don't understand is not an argument. against me.
No, it's not. It's a statement.
It's an ad hominem argument trying to demean me.
It's not. Saying that you're misunderstanding something isn't an attack against you, Kyle. It's just me saying that you're misunderstanding the terms that I'm using. When I ask for evidence that uniquely points to one thing to the exclusion of others, it's because that's what you need to start drawing towards that conclusion. Sure.
I couldn't hear a thing you said there because my son came in here. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So let's see. How about this? How about we just kind of move on past this whole, evidence that uniquely points to the flood? Because, I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question anyway, but I mean, you haven't pointed to any, so I'm going to assume that
okay.
That
I talked about fossils need a flood in order to be formed.
Why are the fossils not organized by density?
What makes you think the fossils are not organized by density?
Their location.
Okay, let's talk about some specific things.
Okay. So we don't find certain. Are you familiar with KT boundary? Right. No. Okay. So the KT boundary is like ash colored. It's kind of a slim line that goes through the strata, and most scientists have pointed to this as being fallout from the meteor that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, right? Because ash and stuff covered the whole Earth. So you find this everywhere on Earth. Now, certain fossils you find below this of certain dinosaurs and things that lived during the Jurassic period and other periods. But you find certain fossils below this that you don't find above this ever. And they're small fossils, little tiny creatures to real big ones. And they're not organized by density whatsoever. There's nobody claims that, I mean, unless you are, nobody that I know of claims that fossils are organized by density.
Okay. So do you agree that in order to be organized by density, the waters have to need a certain amount of stability? Okay. In order for the soils in my jar doing my soil test, in order for them to be organized by density, I have to stop shaking the bottle.
Sure.
Okay.
You're getting ready to contradict yourself. You better be careful.
Contradict myself where?
Yes, because you've already said that it was these moving waters and things. Now you want to say that they're calm waters. It's either a worldwide flood or it isn't. A worldwide flood is not going to be still standing water.
I agree. Yeah. I 100% agree. A worldwide flood is not going to be still standing water.
You point to it for the cause of sediments and limestone and things that don't occur in that. That's why I'm saying that.
You're saying that sediment can't. You're saying that sediment can only, and like limestone can only happen in calm water?
Certain sediments can, but guess what? They would fall out all by density. And we don't see that. It's not larger rocks into smaller rocks. It's all different layers of different things. And also, let me point out too, that we find certain seashells, trilobites, things like that, in multiple layers. Some things we do find all over the place. How is it that they're laid down by density again, if that's the case? And we also, at the same time, though, know that it's not a flood just mixing all these things together, because we do have these defined layers, and we don't find certain things in other layers ever. We don't find humans with dinosaurs ever.
That you're aware of. That you're aware of. You don't
that anyone is
have
aware
the
of.
Authority to speak on behalf of anyone who's ever found a fossil before.
Well, let me add a little caveat in for you. So there has been a few fraudulent things where they've claimed to find,
at least you think they're fraudulent.
No, they were proven fraudulent. One of them was a pig tooth, and they were fraudulent. Absolutely. The ones I'm describing, anything, Nebraska man, things like that. There's been times where they've said that humans were found with some of these other fossils, but it's always, every time that me or any geologist that I'm familiar with is aware of, that these have ever been mixed. And if man was living with dinosaurs, they absolutely would be mixed at some point. You would find that somewhere.
Doesn't happen somewhere, except for the
would you not?
Different depictions of dinosaurs and man kind of together.
Okay. Well, see, here's the thing. What I'm saying is not just a claim that I'm making. It's also supported by geology, genetics. We have, I forget what the study of is it geomorphology, I believe, that talks about the formation of certain land masses and stuff. These things are supported by the science that's already well established and is the consensus. So it's
so it's because it's a consensus that makes it right. Is that what you're claiming?
No, that because it's a consensus, it carries a lot more weight. It's been peer reviewed. It's been corroborated. These things.
It sounds like a bandwagon to me.
Things that were a consensus that they've had to refine and do better on, but it being a consensus by the experts that study the things in these fields is not an appeal to authority like you're trying to make it out to be.
The bandwagon is not an appeal to authority.
That's actually what, like, well, okay. I would disagree. I would say that's if it's not the bandwagon though is the thing. It's not I'm jumping on because somebody said so. The people who have studied these things have made the claims. They've published their claims or their findings in scientific journals, and other scientists have been able to go and do these same studies and come to the same conclusion. And that's how we reach a consensus. I used the word emergent truth earlier. Whenever we get a consensus, that's whenever we get to something that's called an emergent truth, because it's what seems to be the case. And right. And until
your appeal to consensus isn't working on me, I'm sorry.
Well, here's the thing. Science is always open to somebody making a finding that disproves some claim, hypothesis, even a theory, even a law. Science is open to all of those things if you bring the evidence. But here's what you're saying. Well, you don't know of any evidence, therefore it must exist, which is a really
that's not what I said. That's not what I said at all.
I believe that's what you alluded to. Absolutely.
No, I never said that. Okay.
Then we agree.
Your whole thing on we have peer-reviewed journals. That's just a genetic fallacy.
No, you quit using fallacies. I'll quit.
Well, stop making fallacies. A genetic fallacy is saying it's true it's true or correct based on where the information came from.
No, so whenever I'm talking about scientific findings and I'm saying something is the consensus, maybe I'm speaking, poorly because I'm not an expert in these things, but I'm kind of speaking colloquial to you. Like, I'm trying to use the best terms I can, but here's what happens. The consensus, the reason it's a consensus isn't just because, oh, I agree with you. It's because they took the findings and they tried to prove them wrong and they couldn't. That doesn't mean that somebody can't prove them wrong in the future. But in order to do that, you need to bring sufficient evidence to do so.
I agree that they have to make a convincing argument and convince people in order to form a consensus.
That wasn't the important part. The important part is that these have been checked by other scientists. They don't just read it and say, yeah, that makes sense. Those are right. They actually do the work. And when they do the work, they come to the same conclusion and they say, I support that because I did the same experimentation and observation and I came to the same conclusion. They also show methods in which they try to disprove scientific hypotheses. And that is actually the point, to try and disprove it. It's not to prove something true. If you go into it with the goal of proving something true, you've kind of started on the wrong foot anyway. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't agree that trying to prove something true doesn't make it right or wrong. It's not a right foot or a wrong foot for trying to prove something true.
If you go into if you make a scientific claim and you want to check it, experiment, observation, right? If you want to do that, if you go into a scientific claim with my goal is to prove this thing true, that's not how we do science.
According to Karl Popper, and I don't agree with Karl Popper whatsoever.
Scientific method. Like
that's not according to the scientific method. The scientific method says no such thing.
Okay. Okay. You're right. The scientific method doesn't outright state that. But the purpose of the scientific method is to reach a conclusion supported by evidence. It's not to reach the desired conclusion, which is where this falls apart.
Okay, to reach a conclusion supported by evidence. And so I brought evidence and said, okay, well, because I see this and because I see this, we have evidence that this might be the case.
Okay, so
That this might be so.
Absent the story of the Bible, right? Let's just play pretend for 1 minute, and I'm not asking you to be blasphemous or anything like that, but let's pretend for 1 minute that the Bible and all those writings don't exist. These things that you say are evidence, do you think that they point to a worldwide flood on their own without the Bible already stating the conclusion for them?
If I did not have a backdrop of the Bible and I were to go and climb Mount Everest and I were to find fossils on top of Mount Everest, and knowing that fossils require this flood environment in order to be created, I'm going to say, wow, there's evidence here that Everest was at one time underwater. In order for Everest to one time be underwater, that water has to rise up above Mount Everest, or Mount Everest had to have at one time been very, very low, kind of what you're talking about.
So let me refine a little better. When I said let's forget the Bible exists, I didn't mean let's forget that all other science exists. Because again, we know the processes which form mountains. So coming to that conclusion would actually go against the findings of geology and plate tectonics. Does that make sense?
Okay. How would what I said, repeat back what I said that goes against geology or plate
Finding
tectonics.
Fossils on top of Everest. Sure, you can say that it points to a global flood and that there was water over the top. You can say that.
That is one hypothesis.
Right. You can make it. But whenever you look at other evidence of plate tectonics and how mountains are formed, that conclusion, you wouldn't uniquely arrive at that conclusion in any logical way. That's not, because we would say, see, you're picking your conclusion in that case. Instead of looking at what's probably true, you're choosing another truth over what the evidence says.
You haven't provided any other evidence.
We know how mountains are formed. So how does fossils on top of Everest point uniquely to a worldwide flood? It absolutely doesn't.
Okay.
What it does
I'm saying that it could go either way. I'm saying that either, that was a big part of my statement there. Either, the flood waters came up this high, or Everest was down like a valley at one time.
If we know how mountains are formed, you would never even, without the Bible, you would never even consider a flood, because you would say, oh, we know how mountains are formed. This must have been underwater at some point. That's like, you wouldn't say, oh, it's always been a mountain and a flood must have got all the way up here. It's only the Bible and your faith that is leading you to that conclusion. And we just
took the Bible out of the picture, remember? So I'm not talking about the Bible here.
I'm trying to, but you keep insisting on things that do not follow. Non sequiturs.
Okay, just let Carl finish. Just letting you know. No problem. Just letting you know that it's 36 minutes, so we got about 4 left. So maybe let's pick a sort of final topic to talk about, and then go into the endings, and then Q&A would be great.
Sure.
Okay.
You want to go, or you want me to go?
All right. So if I were to go and hike to the top of Mount Everest, I've got 2 conclusions. If I find a fossil up there, either the water was way up here at one time, or Everest was way down there at one time.
Sure.
And you're claiming that because we know how mountains are formed, then that means it was automatically way down there at one time. But that doesn't exactly tell you when the fossils were placed there.
No.
Okay.
Because
so if the mountain was way up here and the fossil was placed there like after the event, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
And so you got to be able to place the fossils there before Mount Everest became a mountain. And that's something that you have failed to do.
Sure. So when you find fossils of animals that live in the water, it's evidence that they live in the water. But whenever you consider evidence from other sources, such as geology, plate tectonics, geomorphology, when you consider those things, and we also take into account that there isn't enough water in 10 Earths to do what you're claiming. So that we know of. Sure, that we know of. So while science doesn't make these absolute claims that I think you're trying to like walk me into here, it's what's probably true. It's the conclusion that makes sense. Your conclusion makes zero sense other than the Bible says it, and so this explains it. You're again,
I never said that.
not the
I
word
never
of the
said that.
day is post hoc rationalization. That's more than one word, but you know what I mean, right? So it's what does the evidence point to what is probably true? And what is probably true is what coincides with those other branches of science. And what coincides with them is that mountains were once low-lying areas, or at least smaller, and that an uprising caused them. And you find animals up there from the ocean, and you say, well, that means that it must have been an area that laid below sea level and had life in it. I mean, these are the conclusions that you reach following the actual evidence. Without the Bible, you never, ever, ever would arrive at the conclusion that there was a worldwide flood that killed all but 8 people.
Do you want a final word there, Kyle? And then we'll go to closings.
Okay. Well, I believe the world is a lot bigger than you think it is. Okay. And there's a lot of evidence for this. Yeah. But I don't think I've got enough time to cover all of flat Earth with you and just this little moment here. But when you consider the bigger picture, things make a lot more sense.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And since Kyle started, what I'll do is bookend it. So, Joe, if you want to do your sort of, you just wanted a few sentences, I think we agreed on, as your closing statement kind of thing, and then we'll go to Kyle.
So, science seems to be the best tool to explain the world around us. And whenever we're explaining this world, we can't discount other branches of science and go on the things we believe to arrive at a truth about the physical world. I feel like that Kyle didn't really address any of my actual questions, and that the things that he pointed to as evidence of a flood were arrived at fallaciously. And I get it. That's what he believes is true. But sometimes we have to put our beliefs aside and accept the natural world around us. And, with that, that's really all I have to say about it. I don't think that Kyle made any sort of case for a worldwide flood. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And Kyle, you as well. Just a few sentences to wrap up, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. I never claimed that the Bible says it, therefore it is true, despite how many times my opponent has claimed I said that. My statement still stands that the calendar exists, time itself exists, the days exist outside of whether or not something happens down here on the ground. Okay, my statement still stands that fossils require a liquid environment in order to be formed. And fossils can be found all over the place. And like when it comes to sedimentary rock, okay, sedimentary rock also requires a flood in order to take place. Yeah, so I think those are kind of the main things, and whether he wants to accept that as evidence of a flood, it's on him. And yeah, evidence outside the Bible totally is what we use to prove the Bible. It goes that way, not the other way around. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carl. And just quickly, before I go into super chats and chats in general, we've got a fair few questions, so we'll rock through them. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to share this. It'd really help out both Kyle, Joe, and myself. Do hit the bell for more of these things upcoming, because hopefully I can do a couple more debates. This one has gone really well. And I have noted as well, both Kyle and Joe, you're absolutely amazing. Didn't talk over one another too much. I love the passion. It's just fantastic. So thank you guys so much. It was really good debate. But let's get into some questions. First up is Pinworm. No question, just saying hello. Thank you, Pinworm. Pinworm's a big friend of the channel, and we do love Pinworm. Connor Runda for $5 says, first time catching a Reid debate. Happy to be here. Hopefully to catch more live debates in the future. Oh, don't make me say words I can't. Slante, mate, you deserve it. I butchered that. I know I did, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Robin Webster gifted 5 readerships. We got hit with Azho, Brian Stevens, Metal Jatter, Dan Robinson, and Missing Mod have been hit, and Robin is showing amazing aim as usual. Regios sent in 5 readerships for Maximiliano Villa. Somebody told me how to pronounce that properly, and I've forgotten already. It's terrible. Hilla, Jason Jacoby, Ashton Richards, Hunter Biden's laptops, and Siddharth Nair. So thank you so much, Regios. Really appreciate it. Ember says, oh, sorry, my bad. I'll do the super chats first. That's my bad. Dr. Dino says, paleontologist here. The rocks show no evidence for a global flood. Kyle, any explanation for paleosols or Aeolon dunes? They can't form underwater.
He's claiming that dunes don't form underwater. I've been to the beach before. I've seen lots of dunes underwater, so I don't know what he's talking about.
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with these sort of geological features. I think he's talking about the particular type of dunes. These
Aeolian dunes are formed by wind.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what he's referring to.
Okay, I'd have to look more into that.
And you can date them back. Sorry.
You can date wind dunes?
You can date the movement of the dunes and sometimes some of the things found within the dunes. But again, through meteorology and geology, we can kind of determine what areas used to not be deserts or dry areas and then later became those. And then the dunes are formed over a long period of time by wind. Doc Dino can explain this better than me.
That sounds like a great discussion to have.
Sure,
to look more into that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he will here shortly.
Okay. Do you have any sort of since the question is for you, Kyle? Do you just want to leave it there, or do you have anything else to add?
I haven't really looked into those kind of dunes before, so yeah.
Me neither. I've got no idea what he's talking about. I can't help you there. I'm sorry. But Dr. Dino strikes again. Dr. Dino again for $5. We have fossils that formed without water. See the fighting dinosaurs or petrified forest national park. Water helps, but fossils do form without floods.
We talked about that when it comes to liquid environment was the key word instead, because we talked about tar pits, and I conceded with tar pits.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. We've got Robin Webster for $5. Kyle, have you ever seen a lake or pond? Are they evidence of a flood? Where did all the water go after the flood?
Where did all the water go after the flood? Well, I believe that there's land outside of the firmament is kind of part of my model. And so you just open the floodgates and they go.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Next super chat is from Maximiliano Velay. Kyle, please stop using that you're aware of response in every debate. It is not the universal defeater you think it is. That's a little bit nasty, but I suppose it is a question.
That you're aware. Well, people like to make a lot of really big definitive statements when make claims that are bigger than they're able to really fit in their mouth. Most people claim this. And we're like, okay, well, until you can show me the survey that most people actually claim that, yeah, you're just making stuff up. So all I can say is most people that you are aware of claim that.
Yeah, fair enough. I thank you. And most of these are for you, Kyle, as you'd probably expect on sort of an atheist channel. You probably knew that already. But yeah, Hooligan is sending, this is a super duper chat for $2 Canadian. I can't handle it. I'm sorry. I have to get it off screen as soon as humanly possible. I can't handle the Canadianness of that super chat at all. I see Spin uses a member chat. Science disproves, only best explanation remains. Do both of you want to have a word on that?
Go ahead, Kyle.
Science disproves, only best explanation remains. Science disproves that what? I don't know. That's not really even a complete sentence.
Okay. So science, whenever what we're looking for is evidence that points to one conclusion to the exclusion of other conclusions. And that's how you would reach for that gold standard theory status of science. But what he's saying here is that science is used to exclude certain hypotheses and prop up the hypotheses that are left, that remain, until only one remains. Is the ideal anyway. That's all.
As I see it, prove and disprove are kind of like the word acceleration, right?
Yeah.
It's like the same thing. Prove and disprove really just mean the same thing. Okay.
Well, we're
there's
talking
like
about what
acceleration and deceleration. It's really just it's the same concept.
Okay, no worries. Sorry, I'm just going to close up non-super chatted questions. Just I have a ton of them, and I really want to thank the audience for sending them in. Provides a really interesting Q&A to actually have questions. You know, it's always helpful, surprisingly enough.
Let me say, Mark, this has been an excellent debate on your channel. You need to do more of these. This has been excellent.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope you've both enjoyed it, and I hope you've both thought that the moderation was fair. But I didn't need to moderate much, so you guys made it really, really easy. I want to thank you for that. Next up is Robin Webster for $2. Kyle, define falsification.
Define falsification. Falsification is like proving something wrong. Okay, if I'm going to make a claim and say the Earth is flat, okay, well, here's the requirement to prove that the Earth is not flat, and that's something required to falsify my claim.
Okay, fantastic. Next we have Maximiliano again, Strax again. Kyle, what is your best evidence for 5 Singaporean, I believe? What is your best evidence that humans and dinosaurs coexisted besides claims, please? Thanks.
Besides claims, any kind of evidence like I make, such as if I were to point to a footprint next to a human footprint next to it. Okay, here we go. Birds are dinosaurs. It's a big thing. Okay, it's a really big thing. A lot of people very firmly believe that the dinosaurs still exist today in the form of birds. Okay, if you are one of those people, then there is absolute proof right there that man and dinosaurs still coexist.
Okay, fair call. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well,
Okay.
So I mean, I think that's kind of a dishonest way to look at it, because the question is obviously about the period that dinosaurs walked the earth, not that we all belong to the same clades that we belong to. I mean, you never outgrow your clade, so to speak. We're all eukaryotes, right? So birds are dinosaurs, but they're not. It's not the same as the period of time that the dinosaurs walked. I think it was a really dishonest way to answer that, honestly. But fair enough.
Well, I want to give Kyle the final thing, so maybe you can respond to that and sort of address it.
If you're claiming that it's dishonest, then you're claiming that birds are not dinosaurs, and that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of the thing. And I'm like, okay.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right. Next up is Beamsy. If set for 10 Australian, $10 dues from the Beamsty. If sedimentary rock needs a flood, how can you explain sedimentary limestone as it cannot form in a flood or in any place of high tribulation?
I don't think that's for me, because I'm the one who's claiming that the sedimentary rock needs a flood.
I think it is. If sedimentary rock needs a flood, how can you explain sedimentary limestone as it cannot form in a flood or in any place of high tribulation? I presume tribulation is a geology word, because Beamsy is a geologist. Probably meaning, correct me if I'm wrong, Beamsy, probably meaning high sort of waters kind of thing. turbulent waters.
Turbulent waters.
That's what
I think so.
Yeah. I'm not claiming that it's happening in the midst of the turbulation. Kind of, if I want to pour concrete, okay, if I want to pour concrete, I'm not going to successfully get that concrete to settle if I'm continually stirring the concrete, right? I got to stop pouring the concrete. I've got to stop and just let it settle in order for that concrete to form. And so that's kind of a limestone kind of situation. It's kind of like concrete. It's got to stop and settle. And so no one claims that the floodwaters over the entire earth were constantly being turbulated, but eventually they did settle.
Okay. And Beamsy strikes again with 10 Australian dollars. If sedimentary rock needs a flood... Oh, no, wait. Hang on. Did you send in two super chats, Beamsy? These two are the same. I tell you what, I'll go to my channel right afterwards and refund this. I'm pretty sure I can do this from my channel because that was a duplicate. Or if you want, I can ask a different question. Just at me in the chat with what you want to do. You sent in twice and oops. Okay, well, if you want me to refund it, I can definitely do that. If you want to ask a different question, just hit me up, just shoot it over. That's not a problem. Whichever you want to do, whichever's easiest for
Well,
you.
since it came up twice, can I address it the second time?
No. No, that's up to Beamsy. If Beamsy wants you to address it, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, I know, that's okay. Al Trucker from using a member chat for 5 months. Since flat Earth is demonstrably wrong, what now? Do you wanna clap back there, Kyle? Give him a
Show me the
piece
curve.
of mind.
Show me the curve.
There you go.
Yeah.
Maximiliano strikes again. Have you all slapped that like button? Let's pretend this is a question for the debaters too. So for 5 Singaporean dollars, KA and Kyle, have you slapped that like button? Yeah.
Not yet. I'll do that after the show. So.
Oh, there you go. At least you're
I
honest.
did it before it started.
Really? You didn't look to find it was worth it or not? Wow.
I was in the room for 30 minutes before anybody got here.
That's some faith right there. So, so really looking forward to this one, were you?
Yeah.
Okay. Beamsy again for 20 Australian dollar dues. Sedimentary layers need to layer down by sediment and then needs to harden enough not to be removed by erosional effects. Then another layer can be laid down. Floods create a single layer. Why is there no single large layer worldwide? I presume I would rather say, Kyle, instead of global, so worldwide.
Floods provide a single layer. I am not aware of that really happening. Like, I don't know, it's kind of my whole soil test example, putting different things in a jar. Like, that's not a single layer there. It's only a single layer if you only have one medium in the jar. Okay, if all of my sand in the jar has the exact same density, then yes, it's just going to be a single layer. But so long as you have different densities in there and different like turbulent factors in there, and so if floods going up a hill or something like that and kind of rolling, it's gonna be different.
Yep, sure. I'm just gonna do some housekeeping. 1 second. Over.
The word I was thinking about earlier was water table. The water table is
water table. Okay.
The amount of water under the ground.
Okay. Next up is Doc Dino for $2. Birds are dinos, but humans never saw non-avian dinos. This is a follow-up to his earlier question about humans living with dinosaurs. So I think he's saying non-avian dinos that he's sort of there. So the earlier question was, what's the best evidence for non-avian dinosaurs living with humans?
Like reptiles, like turtles and tortoises. I still look at crocodiles like living dinosaurs. There's a lot of different animals out there, depending on kind of the definition of dinosaur has changed over the years. Before, like for a long time, dinosaurs were considered reptiles. Oh yeah, they're all reptiles. And then all of a sudden, somehow they all turned into birds. And now people are claiming that birds are reptiles, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, exactly what definition he's exactly going off of, I don't know.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I see spin is giving you a hard time, Carl. I'm sorry. The curve has been shown to you, Carl. You cry CGI. So do you wanna strike back?
He's talking about the moon landings, which are very obviously faked. So yeah, we could get into that in another discussion. I've got a lot of content on the moon landings. But if you were to see the curve down low, okay, even like in a plane, okay, I like to use a hula hoop example. Okay, if you see the curve like in a hula hoop, okay, the backside of your hula hoop is going to be lower than what you're seeing at eye level in front of you. Okay, and that's something that we don't see anywhere from the ground. As Neil Tyson said, that stuff is flat. Yeah, you don't see curvature from 2 millimeters above this beach ball. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we've got Ember sending in a question for Joe. Humans are about 70% water and have spread out to cover the Earth. This has clearly been a catastrophe. How is this not the global flood?
I love the question. I mean, I guess you could make it a metaphor for a flood. I mean, you know, but such a witty question. Thank you, Amber.
Yeah, clearly rhetoric. Question for Kyle. Geology and fossils aside, how do we know there was a Noah? Where's the giant boat? How could it hold the critters?
Evidence, kind of pointing to evidence. I'm really family historian, and I've got my family lines go back to all the way back to Noah on multiple occasions. So that's kind of the evidence I've got.
You're related to the Speaker of the House?
The Speaker of the House?
Sorry, I'll stay out of it.
Okay. but people keep genealogies, and that's kind of a big thing. And genealogies, you don't believe people keep genealogy?
Not like the ones you're talking about.
You don't think people have done that? Like, that's a really important thing when it comes to like Chinese history, our history today. That's a very important thing of kind of part of keeping history itself.
Do you really want to bring up Chinese history?
I just did.
Okay, it continues right through the flood. They never noticed it happened. How?
Okay, you're just saying that they never noticed it happen, but that's not really
convincing
right.
You that they never recorded anything to do with a worldwide flood. They recorded a lot of stuff, but never that.
You'd have to like actually point it out and like bring it up so we can actually look at it together, and that way we can have a more in-depth discussion on it.
Just a sec, guys. I think it would have been good in the debate, but yeah, sorry. I'm very cognizant that we're starting another debate impromptu in the Q&A. Right. But like, no, good points. Like, I'm on board. Fantastic points. But you know, I think that bringing up a new topic's probably going to get into a new debate. Which, you know, save it for we can do another one. That's not a problem at all. Professor Phil Bell. Well, actually, that question was for you, Carl. So do you want to take the final word on that, or are you good? What was that one?
Looking for the question. Geology and fossils aside, how do we know there was a Noah? And I just answered that with, well, I've got evidence that kind of points it in my family history lines.
Yep, no problem at all. Professor Phil Bell sends in the Gambia limestone deposits in South Australia is about 300 meters thick, running along the coast and the Victorian border. This requires millions of years.
Okay, just saying it requires millions of years isn't enough to convince me that it actually requires millions of years. Like, how do you verify that? Yeah, that's kind of one of those big things of making a claim that's too big for your mouth. Like, you're not millions of years old, so you can't make a statement like that and consider it credible.
Okay, no problem. Hillhugger sends in question for Kyle. How did the 24,000 species of trees and shrubs unique to Australia get here and nowhere else?
How did they get to Australia and nowhere else? Mm-hmm. They were planted there? I don't know. Maybe they were in other places, like certain animals were in other places, but they died off and they just killed them everywhere else. I don't really know. I wasn't there. So that's my answer.
No, that's fair. Fair enough. Aunt Jess sent in something I want to ask both of you. I think it's a really good question. What should someone who needs more education on this topic look up, i.e., liberate tar pits? What else is key to understanding the facts? And I want to ask both of you. I realize it was probably directed towards the Kentucky Atheist, but I want to ask Kyle as well. But if you want to go first, Kentucky Atheist, I think that'd be great.
Okay, so I mean, I think everything starts with curiosity. So you know, maybe start with a simple Google search and look for facts by reputable sources. That's what's important. Scientific journals, reputable scientific magazines and things. And there's plenty of articles about these things. And I'm not an expert on this. I rely on not always knowing the answer, but knowing how to find the answer. And it starts with curiosity and a little searching.
Okay, so the couple more super chats have come in. I do have to give those priority. Oh, sorry, that was just, I'm just missing you, Kyle. Go for it. What did you think to that one? I do apologize, mate.
Well, I agree that we can go look up reputable sources, but a reputable source isn't necessarily who says it. It's about kind of the way the information is presented, how well they do at providing you with their baseline. And so how well do they do at showing you their foundation for what they're building the claims upon? And so if they're really good at showing you the foundation of what their claims are built upon, that makes it a much more reputable source than someone who just says, this is so, and they don't provide any foundation whatsoever for their claim. And I've torn textbooks apart just pointing out how many times the textbook says it makes a claim and provides no foundation for that claim whatsoever. And so by that reasoning, just a textbook alone is not a reputable source.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to get to these super chats. They do have priority. So Doc's still clarifying with $2. Dr. Dino, no one never saw a T-Rex. Is that better? So he's talking about dinosaurs never lived with man. So he's saying T-Rex. What's your best evidence for T-Rexes living with Noah? I think that's what he's after.
I don't think he ever lived at the time of Noah to verify exactly what Noah saw and didn't see.
Okay, no problem at all. Tyler West sends in a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, Tyler. Kentucky Atheist, can you explain why you can't have Aeolian sandstone layers sandwiched between limestone and shale?
No, I can't. I would have to research that a bit to answer that question. But I would be more than happy to discuss it with you if you want to contact me. I don't, but no, honestly, I don't off the top of my head.
Okay, no problem at all. Maybe it's one for Beamsy. I think he'd probably know the answer to that, or
Yeah,
least,
yeah.
you know, give an answer to that. Dr. Dino, tell Kyle I'd love to debate him on the origins of the fossil record. Would you like to debate on the origins of the fossil record with Dr. Dino? You don't even have to answer. It's just something that's out there. So
I'm game. I like
your game.
studying
Okay,
all that kind of
cool.
stuff.
Well, it's up to you. If you do want to and you want me to set it up, that's perfectly fine.
Kyle,
I don't know exactly what I'm debating against in that case, though, because I don't have a definitive claim to debate against in that the origins of the yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, maybe I can put you two in contact. You can talk about a subject that you disagree on. I'm sure we can find something somewhere. Richard Madsen, and peace and love to Richard Madsen. It's great to see you back. Question for the panel. If a piece of literature gives a colloquial usage definition for the word, and the Bible identifies that waters are people in Revelation 17:15, why ignore that? Maybe Kentucky Atheist, do you want to go first? Because you've had very few questions.
Well, I mean, I'm not real sure exactly what the question is here, but I think within that piece of literature, that's perfectly fine. If you define a word differently and then use it in that different way, you've informed. And for the literature, that's true. But then if we go to apply it to what's true about the world, that's when you get into different things. And is it sufficient to make those claims? But within the literature itself, if they're going to use a word incorrectly, at least they explain how incorrectly they use it.
Okay, no problem. Just give me one sec. And Kyle, do you have an answer for us?
Okay, just because the word waters can sometimes refer to people doesn't mean they always refer to people. Okay, and so when I look in the general dictionary, it's got like 10 or more definitions for a single word. And we kind of see that sometimes in the Bible. There's an idiom. The Bible is full of idioms and symbols. And so to send hornets after someone is to send the army towards someone. But that doesn't mean all hornets and bees are always referring to the army.
It's metaphor.
Yeah, there are metaphors, and yeah, I get that. But to say that that all waters always mean people, I don't think people are drinking people like anytime water is used.
I've
Excellent,
met some
fantastic.
Thank
you. Question for Kyle from Ember. Lots of love to Ember. Amazing channel. Do subscribe to Ember for some amazing content. How do we know that another culture's flood story isn't the true virgin? Like the Hopi claim that an ancient flood carved the Grand Canyon, and they have a canyon to show for it.
I really like that question because I agree that there are many different cultures and civilizations out there that share similar attributes. And one of the ones I really, really enjoy is the Onondagan creation story, which also starts with in the beginning, the earth was only water. And yeah, they had a animal that went down to the bottom and brought up the soil or clay from the bottom of the water and put it on the earth, put the dirt on the back of a sea turtle or something like that, right? And so for me, it's a question about which church is the true church. And that gets into a huge thing about the great apostasy, which ends up where instead all of these different cultures were at one time one church, but because of different divisions and disputes among the people, they kind of scattered, right? And so when it comes to finding out which church is the true church, which I think is the root of this question, it really comes down to your personal experiences with the creator, and the creator is the one that can really reveal that to you.
Fantastic, thank you. Dr. Dino strikes again. Kyle, there is not enough water above or below the Earth's crust to flood the planet. We know the composition of the crust and the mantle, the core, every part of the planet.
That's another one of those big statements that are a little too big for his mouth there. I don't think I've ever seen him verify exactly how much water the entire Earth's water table has. Like when you can actually show me the research that says under the ground there is this much water and this is how we verify it, then we can talk. But until then, I think you're just making stuff up.
Okay, thank you. And IC Spin has sent in a super chat, so I've got to go to that one as a priority. $1.99 IC Spin, thank you so much. How did Noah and his family repopulate the Earth?
I think he's asking how babies are made. I think
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, how are babies made? And I'd rather not get into that right now.
I don't think this is the channel for it, to be honest with you. Yeah. But do you have anything to add, TKA? Do you know how babies are made?
I think I do. I think I know how. I'm from Kentucky, so I'm familiar with people making babies with their family members too. So.
Oh, okay. It's not the channel for that either. Wow. Okay.
I think that's what he was actually asking.
Yeah. I think he was probably more alluding to how did they repopulate so fast, I think. Is sort of what he was alluding to.
So fast. Imagine. Oh, I didn't see any kind of time frame on
genetics.
That. Okay. How did they repopulate? Yeah, it's just
okay. Sure.
They had sex. I'll say that.
There you go. Someone had to say sex on this channel at least once before the end of my stream. Kyle, lithified desert dunes are entangled with rocks that the flood model says were formed within a 1 year long flood. Please explain.
Lithified desert dunes are entangled with rocks that the flood model says were formed within 1 year long flood. I'm sorry, I don't really understand the question?
Perhaps if you want to clarify, Big Bad Mama, I'll keep an eye out for it. Let me grab my chat. I'll keep an eye out for it. Let's see.
The flood model says we're formed within. Okay, where does it flood model say it was formed in 1 year? Like, you got to point that out to me. I think it's kind of a loaded question, but I don't even see a question mark. So is it even a question?
Not sure about that one. So I think he's. I'm not sure what he's saying.
So lithified, if I'm not mistaken, refers to hardened sand dunes, and they're entangled with rocks that were formed within the 1 year long flood period. Because you stated earlier that the geology that we see, the sediments that we see, are a result of the flood. I think that's what he's getting at here, but clarification definitely needed.
Okay, I pointed out in the very beginning of my statement that there are two floods, one that has fossils and one that doesn't. And this one, I don't see anything saying that. Yeah, because the one that doesn't can take a lot longer than just a year. And so the whole Bible's flood model, he's kind of getting at something that I'm not even sure where he's saying that. He's got to point to a specific quote if he wants to say the flood model says this.
Okay, Beansy, he did double up his super chat. So his second super chat, I'm gonna throw in what he said. So he's talking about a aeolian wind-borne slate is formed by mud, dirt in air plus water equals mud. So if it was slate, it was mud. Limestone is a lot more complex as there are different limestones.
Okay, and I agree that that not all sediment is from that specific time period, and so sedimentary rock is still being formed today, and I'll agree with that.
Okay, another super chat came in from Robin. Oh, wow, you guys just thank you so much. Robin for $5 says genetics, I think she's talking about, show that Homo sapiens came close to extinction with numbers around 3,000 individuals. Population by 8 is not possible. Do you want to respond to that, Kyle?
Just saying it's not possible doesn't really convince me that it's not possible. I'm sorry, you're going to have to produce a better argument than that.
Okay, no problem.
I can just point out my mice. Okay, my mice. Yeah, I breed mice and rats and all kinds of little critters. But I can have a population of 2, and that population of 2 can explode and turn into a population of 50 or more. And so just saying that a population of 8 can't similarly explode, it makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Okay, and
I understand people are different than mice, but still.
Icy Spinner sent in another one for $1.99. Where did the water go after the flood ended? And I presume that's for you, Carl.
Well, I can assume that it went back underground. Okay. And so, okay, I'm not a glober. Okay. But even on a globe model, okay, just imagine like the core magma, okay, suddenly getting hotter. And all of a sudden, all that water starts to boil underwater, under the ground. And so it rises. And then as soon as that core starts to cool, now that water can recede and go back underground. Okay, that's just one thing, and that's not even on my model. That's the globe model. And so when the Earth is flat, okay, I don't know how. I don't have a depth. I have no clue how deep the Earth is. And so when you have a flat Earth, you have a lot more places to store that water than you do on a globe. A globe is a very limited place to store the water. But on a flat Earth, I can store water like who knows how deep underground, but I can also store that water outside of the, like in the places outside the firmament. I can store that water like above or off to the sides. Just move it aside.
Okay, Icy Spin again coming at you. Has the flood ever been modeled to show what would happen to the ecosystem, weather, etc.?
Has it ever been modeled to show what would happen? Okay. You got to define the word model, because by the dictionary, okay, the word model is just a description of something. So the Bible itself providing a description of the flood is a model, okay, by definition. And so the Bible describes this model as destroying like the living life forms. It describes it's described as destroying humans. Okay. And so that is specifically talking about an ecosystem, so long as people are part of the ecosystem. It's also described as destroying all kinds of living creatures, which are ecosystems. So hopefully that helps resolve this question.
Well, that kind of relates to the next question, which says, has Carl told us what's under the flat Earth bottom? So do you know what's under the bottom, Carl, and what's actually there?
We have not been able to dig very far. Okay, and so without being able to dig very deep, I have no way of knowing.
No problem at all. Tenebra Sint says, Carl, the purpose of the flood was to eliminate evil. Why does evil still exist?
Why does evil still exist? That's a really good question. And for me, when it comes to just writing a word, okay, the word love, okay, if I were to write the word love in white letters on a white piece of paper, no one would be able to see it or recognize it, right? But if I write the word love on a black piece of paper with white letters, now everyone can see it and recognize it. And so it's part of us as developing in order to make our own choices, and in order to be really aware, we need to experience that kind of stuff. We need opposition in our life in order to grow. And so I really like the poem about trees. Okay, good timber does not grow with ease. The stronger wind, the stronger trees. And God does not want us to be weaklings.
Nice poetry as well. That's what you get on this channel. Fantastic. Thanks, Carl. Another couple of super chats have come in. We're almost through them, and there's less than half a dozen to go, so it's not long. I might ask do people stop in sending in super chats. I do want to let Kyle and Joe go at some point. I can't hold them hostage forever. But Maximiliano Villar says, 5 Singaporean. Kyle, what's outside the supposed firmament, and how do you know?
I don't know what's outside the firmament because I haven't been there.
Okay, no problem.
As far as I can remember.
Fair enough. Robin Webster writes in for $2. Thank you so much, Robin. Joe, explain the difference in mice and human population. So that's the Kentucky Atheist.
I'm not sure what you're asking for here. The difference in mice and human populations. I mean, other than the subtle differences that we're two different creatures, it's pretty similar, actually. I
think he's asking about why I can have 2 mice turn into 50 mice within like my garage, as compared to why 2 people can't turn into 50 people.
Well, okay. Smaller gestation periods. This is, that's how they propagate their species.
Okay. Maximiliano for 5 Singaporeans strikes again. Carl, you mentioned you haven't dug very deep. Do you know how deep humans have actually dug? Honest question, please give me. Well, Carl's always going to give an honest answer, I think. But
there's
sure, honest question.
Borehole. There's the Russian borehole, and I think China's trying to do something like that now too. I don't remember, but I think it was like 2 miles deep. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but 2 miles deep isn't like super deep.
I think it was I'm not sure about that one. I do think you're right though, Carl. I think it was a Russian borehole that they did. I think you are right.
It's called called like something obvious, like the super deep borehole or something like that. It's they found a lot of neat things in there though. That was really cool, I have to say.
Yeah. You can Google it. So I don't really know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, and from the lovely Bree from Hive Science, another amazing channel if you like bugs of all shapes and sizes. Bree's fantastic. Ask him, which I believe she is talking about Carl, to clarify if you know the difference between appeal to authority, which is citing your sources, and the actual fallacy is appeal to false authority.
Okay, so
So
he's
do you know
asking
the
me to
difference
clarify
there?
if I know the difference between appeal to authority and appeal to false authority. Okay, so if I'm talking to someone else who, like, there's an actual authority, okay, and so that is cool when everyone acknowledges them as an authority, and then there's a false authority. So I get that there's a difference between that, and I'm not saying we can't ever appeal to authorities. And so in a court of law, for example, we can appeal to authority as someone who's stating something as a fact as law. But someone, the ice cream man pulled me over, that would be, and the ice cream man gave me a ticket and he has no authority to give me a ticket. That would be an appeal to false authority.
Okay. Bamesy is going to kill me. He sent in another $5 Australian. Thank you so much, Bamesy. I really appreciate it. When we do dig down, do you hope to meet? I think he's just doing it so I can't pronounce things. Varup Pakasa. I don't know what these things are. Mahapand Masama. Tomanosa or Bada. A at the end. I don't know what that's about.
I have no
Don't
idea
ask
either.
me.
It's a different language.
Are they Hindu gods? I'm not sure if I don't think Kyle's a Hindu. I mean, I haven't
No.
checked lately, but I'm very certain. Let me check. Let me see if I can find out what Beamsy's talking about. Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm not going to read that out. Beamsy, somebody bonk Beamsy. Okay. This is a very similar question. Ask how we went from Noah's family to the world population we have now in 6,000 years. I think you've answered that one, Kyle. So I'll just skip by it. I'm really curious. Booba Sweat, thank you so much. I'm really curious to see how Kyle would explain the fern fossils found 13,000 feet underground in northern Alaska.
13,000 feet underground in northern Alaska. For me, that would have to show some kind of a massive landslide in order for that to happen. And exactly how that happens, I don't know. All I can think about is a massive landslide, and I think that's like evidence for a flood. Something's got to move it, either like a volcano going off and bringing the dirt and bringing it up on top of it, or being through water. Something's got to move the dirt.
Fantastic. Thank you. Tyler West, and this is the last couple of questions. Question for Kyle. Why do we find Aeolian sandstone layers in the middle of flood layers?
Why do we find... Okay, so the Aeolian sandstone layers are like wind. Is that right? It's like the wind sandstone. And so, like I said, I don't believe that there's just been one flood. And so if there was a wind sandstone and then there's flood on top of it, then that tells you that there's going to be, at one time it was dry land, and then after that the flood came on top of it. That's all I can say.
Okay, and last question. Thank you so much. From Taniba Synth, thank you so much. Ark means box, not boat. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the animals are placed in a wooden box. Noah's flood is just a plagiarized version of the Gilgamesh flood myth. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would like to see them verify that somehow. Like, that's his opinion. I get that, but exactly like what brought him to that opinion, I have yet to see.
Okay, no problem. And that was the last question. So that about wraps it up. Thank you. I want to give great thanks to both Kyle and Joe for being here. It was a fantastic debate, really interesting. I thought it went really well. And again, thank you both for your respect for one another, and made my job easy, as I've got a cold and I didn't really want to work hard. But everybody made me work hard by sending in tons of super chats and tons of questions. So thank you. Thank you for that. I really do appreciate each and every one. And I will try to see if I can secure some more debates and have a few more things on. If you could, before you go, a like, subscribe, sharing with your friends, and ringing the bell. It all helps so much. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to be kind to yourself and be kind to each other. and hopefully we can have some more respectful debaters like the ones that were performed by these two wonderful gentlemen. Thank you so much, everybody, and take care.